Okay, it's together. So how did I get it together? That's the question, isn't it? It's even working nice and smoothly. Okay, so let's take it apart, step you through the process. I'll lay these pieces out the right way up so that they'll go back the right way. Zoom out of it, see a bit more. Let's take that off. Take this off. This spring, which just sprung and I'll need to find it. The pinion and the other indicator. Now, first of all, it's easiest if you have something to build this on. Because the way this is constructed, these little tabs, these indicators, stick out proud of the front. So if you put it flat down on the board, that's not going to work. You need some way of supporting it. I've got this, which is just a piece of Delrin from my scrap bin. Probably the remains of something I turned a decade ago. It was too good to throw away. But it's ideal for this situation. It could have been anything else. It could have been a suitable sized socket, anything you like. But I'm starting here with that piece there. That goes right up against the centre. Then we want our pinion. And the little wee wheel on the end, that goes upwards. So making sure that's hard against its stop. I'll put the other one in, the other indicator. And just get that seated on the pinion. That's sitting on the second of the gears. We've got this piece, we've got this piece that needs to go in next. And this needs to line up in a particular place. Now you'll see this piece here has got a little notch in it, a little nick. We need to line that little nick there up with this pin. Like that. This piece has got a little notch here, a little nick in it here. That needs to line up in the same alignment. It sits on a pin right here. That's this hole. And this is going to line up, lift that across until it lines up. Just checking the alignment there. That looks right, and that would give me my alignment. We've got another component we need to go in here. That's this return spring. So we can take this off. I'll put its return spring loosely in place here. Put this one back on, making sure I've got that little notch lined up. Just check my alignment here again. That looks pretty good. Yep. This spring bears against the stud on the underside of this piece right here, and the other end of it tucks in against the case. See if I can do this. Like that. Easy. This piece, that slot picks up the stud on that arm there. Like that. This piece has got a notch in it. The notch lines up with the tab on that piece. Like that. This piece. This hole here goes over this pin here. There are two screws here and here. You've got to tuck the plate under those because otherwise it won't go. And get that plate across to where that pin is. That's all just sitting there. You can see this little stud poking through, and clip that plate down into place. And if I hold that together, I can rotate this, and you'll see that the indicators swing from the inwards position to the outboard position and back again. So that is all complete. That's ready to go on the camera. I think in practice what I'll do is I'll take it apart. I'm just going to wipe a bit of molybdenum paste on a couple of those surfaces for good measure, very sparingly. But that's it. It's no great drama to assemble this as long as you go about it in the right way. But absolutely essential, you need something that you can stand that on so that you've got nothing pressing on those tabs. Otherwise you can fight from here to Christmas trying to get that thing together. Okay, so much for that. As you can see, I've been busy cleaning up that lens, getting rid of all of that nasty thick grease, and that moves nicely now. That's very good. So I've got to check that I've got this all arranged. Everything is seated as it should be. The retaining ring we want off because I need to put that on after everything's in place. The retaining ring looks a lot better now. I think the very tip of this outside thread here is slightly damaged. I think that's why it's a bit rough doing that last little bit. So, this piece, how does this couple? Well, these two little screws that you see sitting through here, they've got to couple into those slots there. There's also a hole in the plate here that couples to that pin. So if we're with luck we can get this all on here. That felt to me like that's seated. Let me try the retaining ring. Because the retaining ring's down in a little well here, so it's difficult to get this thing started. Oh, it is running on though. That's good. Let's do what I said I was going to do in the first instance, and let's try a toothpick. That's it, I think. Yeah, that ring seems to move smoothly. Depth of field pointers move, it's moving the rings underneath it. Everything appears to be in place. That's good. Let's back that up a little bit. See if that makes it even smoother. It might not, might do, or it might not. Certainly it works nicely there. I need to put that little clamp in there, that little bracket. Let's check that. Retaining ring. And I'm just lining up one of the little notches there with this screw hole here, because that's where that bracket's going to go. Checking that feels reasonably tight. It's probably a bit loose there. I'm going to try one more notch. Try it there. Now where's that little bracket? Here it is. That slots in there. And the tiny screw locks that in position. Or it will do if I can get it started. Okay. So far so good. So what that lacks now is the front element, which I've got sitting here all cleaned and ready to go, and of course I'll need to put some grease on that, and it's not really like a helical thread, so I'm just going to use some synthetic grease on there, and I'll just make sure I blow off all the dust first. Alright, with that lens clean, I'll apply some synthetic grease to the thread here. And the threads don't need to be completely packed with grease. Get that started, run that in, that moves nice and smoothly. There's no rattle in there, that's just fine. So that shutter is ready at that stage to go back on the camera. The setting of the focus adjustment will have to be done once it's on the camera body, of course. But basically the shutter's all serviced. That should work quite nicely. The aperture opens and closes smoothly, and by and large we're in business there. Right, I think I'll put that to one side and think about the camera body. Well, the camera body, what have we got here to worry about? For a start, we've got a spacer there, a shim, for the shutter and lens assembly. We can lift that off, it doesn't need to be there. Now what am I hoping to do with this? Well, I want to strip the film advance mechanism, the shutter cocking mechanism. I'll leave the meter in the camera body, and I'll probably have the front off. And I may do this in sections. Let's start at the base of the camera, get that film advance lever off first, I think. I'll start with the Leatherette patch. Three screws hold the film advance lever in place. I can see from the state of those screws they're a bit rusty looking. Probably means the camera's been put down somewhere damp. To achieve that, you've only got to put them down on a table that's had a drink spilled on it. See, those screw heads are quite rusty. Now with things like that, rusty stuff tends to swell up, of course. That could easily break a lever like this. There aren't many of these left in the world. Two screws hold the tripod socket surround in place. There's no back catch cover on this retinette. And the tripod socket surround is plastic. That matches the film advance lever. Now this is a chrome trim on the base plate. So, let's see if this leatherette will lift off it. The leatherettes are stuck quite well, but they'll usually come off a chrome brass trim easier than they'll come off the aluminium casting, typically. You'll notice there's no central boss in the base plate of this camera, unlike that on the Retinas. That boss was there for use with the camera platform. That means if you're stealing the leatherette from the base of a retinette to recover your Retina 3C, you're going to have to cut the hole for that central boss. There are a few other changes with the leatherette with the Retinettes. You'll notice that this has nothing embossed on the back of it. The earlier Retinettes had Retinette embossed there. Yeah, this leatherette's stuck fairly well here. There's a bit of corrosion under here on the aluminium body casting. Right, well I'll carry on with this and get this leatherette off. I don't expect it to be a major problem, but it's going to be boring to watch. Well, the leatherette's off. I've seen better results, but that'll be okay. No one will notice once it's all back together. And this chrome trim on the base plate will have that off. You can see here what I meant about the corrosion that's under there. Most of that mess is corrosion. I don't think any of it is really the adhesive. Right, that's that chrome trim off. Have to clean that. Okay, so what can you see here? Well, the first thing you notice if you're used to looking at retinas is there's no lock lever. There's no lock lever in a retinette. It doesn't lock up the film advance when you reach the counter reaches number 1. It just does nothing, it just carries on. Okay, so I'll something through the fork of the rewind and I'll just unscrew that knob. Top cover, 2 screws here, like a retina. Chrome plated. And 1 at the end of the top housing. Okay, let's lift this off. Here's our top cover. All the viewfinder components are in the top cover, they're not on the body. These are a bit entertaining to reassemble. If you don't need to take them apart, I suggest you don't. The shutter release here, we've got the button and the shaft with its return spring. Unlike early ones, it doesn't have a tiny spring deep down inside to fall into the guts. The top of the camera here, we can remove that strap lug. Well, I say that, but it doesn't want to move. And the rewind shaft can come out. Now here is the meter needle. That is quite vulnerable. Keep your fat fingers off that. It won't go well if you don't. The strap lug at this end of the body, 2 screws. Well, I say strap lug, but actually it's not a strap lug, it just supports the top cover. This chrome trim should lift off. Our selenium cell here is flapping around loose. It's got its wires poking out the bottom. It just seats in here and it flaps around and causes you problems. So that's another thing to be aware of, because if you break those wires, well, obviously you're going to have to join them back up again. The film advance components at the top, where we have the familiar screw here that would hold the gear and so forth on a retina. But here it's fixed to this crank, and this crank swings across here. So I'm just going to remove that screw. Lift that crank away and slide it back. I should be able to lift that out of the body. The rest of the film advance mechanism here. There's the tweezers I'm looking for. Okay, we've got a washer there, that drive dog, this piece which is familiar, this spring, this gear which again is just like on a Retina, and this is fixed with two screws. One of them has the pull and return spring. These screws are quite tight, unusually so. I'll just remove that spring and put it aside so I don't lose it. The pawl and its little standoff, as you'd get from a Retina. Just a plain screw there, as you'd have on a Reflex or Retina 3S. Our sprocket shaft here is plastic. I've got to get the button off the base of the rewind button off the base of the camera.